Warning: the following episode contains elements of horror that may be unsuitable for listeners under the age of 13. Listener discretion is advised. Hello. We've been expecting you. I'm Brianna, and welcome to Beyond the Bazaar's 13 Nights of Frights. From October 19th through October 31st, Halloween night, we will be sharing with you some of our favorite hand-picked urban legends, lore, stories, and more that we love to talk about during this special time of year. So take a seat, make yourself comfortable for these 13 nights of terror. Hey everybody, welcome to our 7th night of our 13 Nights of Frights here at Beyond the Bazaar. I'm Brianna, your host, and tonight we're going to talk about an urban legend native to America from the Native Americans known as the Wendigo. So before we get into tonight's topic, I do want to touch on our topic from yesterday, which was the legend of Skinned Tom, which was another urban legend from the Appalachian area of the United States, the state of Tennessee. And I really liked sharing that with you guys, and I hope you guys like hearing about it. As I said in previous episodes, we really like urban legends and want to get into sharing more of them with you guys from all over the world. And the 13 Nights of Frights is kind of a highlight of our favorites, our favorite tales, favorite bizarre events, happenings, what have you. We're just sharing a little bit of our favorites here with you guys during this spooky season leading up to Halloween. So, to tonight's topic, once again, we're going to be talking about the Wendigo. The Wendigo is known by several names. Wendigo, spelled W-I-N-D-I-G-O, or W-E-N-D-I-G-O. Some pronounce it Wetigo, Wetigo. All of these roughly translate to the evil spirit that devours mankind. The Wendigo is said to roam the north woods of the state of Minnesota in the United States, within the forest of the Great Lakes region. It's also said to also roam central regions of Canada, and is monster-like in appearance with some characteristics of a human. Some say that a Wendigo is a spirit that possesses a human and makes them become a monster. Historically, the Wendigo is associated with cannibalism, murder, greed, and other cultural taboos against such behaviors. The Wendigo has been known among the Algonquian, the Ojibwe, I'm not sure if I pronounced that right, I'm sorry if I mispronounced it, the Eastern Cree, the Saulteaux, West Main Swampy Cree, the Scapi, and the Innu peoples, Native Americans. They have described them as giants, being many times larger than humans. That's frightening. Although the appearance may vary, the common characteristics of the Wendigo is a malevolent, cannibalistic being that has a strong association with winter, the north, and coldness. And according to legend, a Wendigo is created whenever a human has to resort to cannibalism to survive. Historically, this occurred often when Native Americans and settlers found themselves stranded in snowy, icy conditions in the North Woods. Sometimes left stranded for days, any survivors may feel compelled to cannibalize the dead in order to live. This is why the Wendigo also has strong ties to the cold, starvation, and famine. In other versions of the legend of the Wendigo, humans who display extreme gluttony, greed, or access might have been possessed by a Wendigo. Depending on who you ask, there are different descriptions of a Wendigo. The Algonquian legend describes the Wendigo as a giant with a heart of ice, his body a skeleton and deformed, with missing lips and toes. Whew, that's really scary. The Ojibwa legend describes the Wendigo as a large creature, tall as a tree, without lips and jagged teeth. Its breath has a weird hiss to it. Its footprints full of blood, and being extremely territorial, would consume any man, woman, or child that entered into its territory. And the ones that were consumed were considered the lucky ones. Sometimes, if the Wendigo decided, would possess the person instead, and that person would become a Wendigo as well, hunting down and feasting upon the flesh of the people they once loved. In both versions, the Algonquian and the Ojibwa versions, the Wendigo shares the characteristics of having no lips. In other versions, the Wendigo also shares traits such as glowing eyes, long yellowed fangs, and long tongues. They're usually described, as you heard with the Algonquian and the Ojibwa legend, that they're extremely tall. In most retellings of the legend, they state that the Wendigo is about 15 feet tall and are described as being extremely thin, almost emaciated, and their skin stretching tight over their body that you can see their bones clear through the skin. In some tellings of the legend, the Wendigo is said to have a stag skull head with sunken eyes and ashen skin. So the Wendigo has, for those of you not familiar with what a stag is, it's a male deer. So it has the skull of a male deer. Oh, good gracious. This is really scary. There are also some other Native American versions of the Wendigo that state that the Wendigo had once been human, but had been transformed into the creature by the use of magic. Wendigos are said to have been cursed to wander the land, eternally seeking to feel their ever-growing appetite for human flesh. And if there's nothing for them to eat, it eventually starves to death. Now, if the term Wendigo sounds familiar, there's actually a medical term in psychology known as Wendigo psychosis, which is considered by some psychiatrists to be a condition when a human has an intense craving for human flesh and has a strong fear of becoming a cannibal. This psychosis, unsurprisingly, is said to occur within people living around the Great Lakes of Canada and the US, and it usually develops in winter. So, honestly, who's to say that these people are really having a psychosis? They could actually be turning into Wendigos, or something's happening. I don't know. But for it to have some type of actual psychological term for it, something's going on, in my opinion. Those inflicted with Wendigo psychosis usually experience poor appetite, nausea, and vomiting. They develop a delusion of being transformed into the Wendigo monster, and people with Wendigo psychosis begin to see others around them as being edible. But even though their appetite is calling for them to eat humans, they have an extreme fear of becoming a cannibal or becoming the Wendigo monster. It is said that there are still Wendigo sightings to this very day in the areas of northern Ontario, near a town called Kenora. And in that town, it's been spotted by traders and hunters for decades. There are many locals in that area that believe that the Wendigo roams in the woods and fields in the northern Minnesota and Canada area, namely, once again, Kenora and Ontario. Due to the sightings, Ontario, Canada has been nicknamed the Wendigo capital of the world, and sightings of the creature have continued well into recent years. That's just incredibly terrifying. Like, can you imagine just like being out hunting or being out just doing whatever, and you see a 15-foot tall creature with skin and bones showing a stag skull for a head? Can you just imagine that? Just like sit and try to picture that if you can, just how you would feel. Like, I wouldn't know what to do. Like, I know when I'm watching movies or whatnot, but like, I would run, I would do this, but sometimes I feel like I would just freeze. Like, I wouldn't know what to do. I wouldn't know if I would run or freeze. Like, I feel like I would run, but at the same time, like, sometimes you can just be so scared that you just can't move. And I think that's probably what will most likely happen to me. I'm sad to say, but if I see something like that, I'm not going to know what to do. I'll probably pass out on the spot. And the Wendigo is one of my favorite urban legends, because one, it's from the Native Americans, and that's one thing that made it very interesting to me. And the first time I ever heard of the term Wendigo was when I was younger. I actually watched a movie called Wendigo, and it kind of explained what the Wendigo creature is, and it was actually a Wendigo actively hunting people. And I remember watching the movie, and there's one bit in the movie where the Wendigo, which is extremely tall and runs very, very fast. Like, I'm assuming that they can move very, very fast, and this thing was killing everybody. It was killing everyone, and well, not everyone, but anyone that it came across, which makes sense by the legend. It said that anything that wandered into its territory, man, woman, a child, what have you, it doesn't matter, it will kill. And that's pretty much what happened in that movie. If you do ever get the chance to, once again, the movie is called Wendigo. I do believe it is on Amazon Prime, because I actually have it on my list to watch again. I wish I would have watched it before this episode, because then I could have talked about it some more, but it is on Amazon Prime, and I would definitely go check it out, especially after, hearing about it here on the podcast. Go check it out. It's a really good movie. Now, another interesting thing about the Wendigo is the fact, like I said before, that there is a psychological term, Wendigo psychosis, for people who believe that they've been possessed by a Wendigo, or that they are becoming a cannibal. I think that's really, really, I think it's really one of the first times I ever heard of like something that's supposedly an urban legend actually becoming something that's a medical term, which makes you think there has to be some type of truth to it. Like, there has to be some type of root, whether it's just people, out here, like, becoming super, super emaciated and having their bones showing and out here actually killing people. And especially back a long time ago, where people were taller, and also sometimes when you're afraid, things can look a lot bigger. So I don't want to say that the Wendigo is not real. I don't want to say that. Personally, I think my mind is open enough to think that things like this just don't pop out of people's imaginations. People see things, and these legends and lore are shared over time and shared throughout the decades, or sometimes even centuries. They're shared, and I believe that there's some truth to them. People just don't wake up one day and say that it was a 15-foot monster unless they actually saw something to influence that. So that's just my own personal belief, but I do think that it's cool that there is a psychological medical term for people who are inflicted with that frame of mind, that type of thinking, that they feel that they're maybe becoming this, or they may actually be becoming it if the Wendigo is a real thing. I personally believe that it is, but that's entirely up to you guys to judge what you guys want to believe. But like I said, I'm open to the possibility of anything. And that's why the Wendigo was one of my favorites to share and to talk about and to just explore. And by doing some research here, I got to learn a little bit more about it. At first, I kind of just had like a general overview once again, just by watching the movie. I mean, just doing like some just general overview reading, but I was able to get some really detailed as to where it comes from and why it's associated with winter. And the starvation and famine is pretty much a good connector, because that was, especially back in the time where the legend formed, that was a really, really extreme worry back then, not having enough to eat and starving to death. So that's just perfect fodder for an urban legend like the Wendigo to be born. And then you also have, per some tellings by Native Americans, that the Wendigo is caused by a source of magic, whether it's a curse or a ritual. Something causes the Wendigo to become what it is. And speaking of rituals, we do have another ritual for you guys tomorrow. It's actually a popular old ritual that you most likely have heard of, but it's still a favorite of ours, and it's just a classic. So come back tomorrow to hear the ritual of light as a feather, stiff as a board, a part of our 13 Nights of Frights. Until then, as always, stay bizarre.